It's been well reported in the last couple of weeks about the significant news concerning the adjustment of the city's floodplain here in Stevens Point. It's a very interesting project that will impact about 265 different property owners here in our community. It's been a long road to get this work done, and that's something that we have talked about in the area news media and here on Community Focus. A project that began in 1999 when the city of Stevens Point raised a number of concerns over the long-standing classification of the portions of our city east of the Wisconsin River as a high hazard area within the 100-year floodplain. Now, even though the city of Stevens Point, and this was an important point, had not experienced any flooding in the 70 years that the Stevens Point Dam had been raised, the Army Corps, the DNR, and FEMA and others had classified that area as being in the 100-year floodplain, requiring very expensive homeowners insurance to cover a potential flood on property, on homes in that area. Well, as we have talked about before on our program, back in 1999, we went to work to correct that. We felt the city of Stevens Point, under my administration back in 1999, could make a strong and compelling case to the federal government that that wasn't right, that those properties, including over 200 privately owned homes, should not be paying exorbitant rates for flood insurance because the probability of a flood in that area was very unlikely. Well, as we have talked about, the Federal Emergency Management Agency in early January granted the city's request to revise what's called the Letter of Map Revision for the floodplain in the city of Stevens Point, which after 90 days of a public hearing and other required legal matters will take away forever the requirement that homeowners have that flood insurance. Now, it is a major story, and the reason I say that is because perhaps of all the work that had to go into it. What started in '99 was a project that I passed to Mayor Andrew Halverson in 2007 and asked the Mayor-elect Halverson then, to continue please working hard on this project. He did, and he and his staff deserve lots of credit for pushing it forward for the next 7.5 years. As we have talked about in the media, it's a little ironic that in the transition back from Mayor Halverson to Mayor Wescott, the project was waiting to be finished, and we're delighted to report to the committee and to the community that the work is finished. The federal government has agreed to our request, and that will have a significant impact on our community. Now, as with any project, projects are driven by people who deserve credit for long hours of work, and a few people that I would like to at least cite here on Community Focus today would include former Alderman Neil Nealis. It was former Alderman Neil Nealis that brought this to the attention of the community back in 1999, brought it to the attention of our Community Development Director, John Gardner, and John and his staff went to work with the engineering department and the Director of Public Works at that time, Director John Van Alstine. John Gardner continued to work on it very hard, very diligently, from '99 until the time that I left in 2007, and I wish to not only recognize former Alderman Neil Nealis, but to recognize John Gardner, our former Stevens Point Community Development Director, for all of the hard work that John put into getting approval from the federal government. Our current Director of Public Works, Scott Schatzschneider, deserves credit too for the last few years of continuing to champion this project, to move this project forward, and to say it's important for our community. As we know, when you're doing paperwork for the federal government, FEMA, for the Army Corps of Engineers, the paperwork can be at sometimes, well, daunting to say the least. There's a lot of work that goes into it, a lot of analysis that's required in order to get approval. But we're pleased to report that the process has been approved by the federal government, and that will have some pretty positive effects in our community. Let me give you a couple of examples. At current estimate, there are about 200 homes within the floodplain zone as it exists today. Again, there are about 250, 260 various properties within the floodplain zoned either as commercial or vacant properties. So now we'll do some quick math for you. Flood insurance premiums today go for between $1,000 and $1,500 per year for residential homes. So the cumulative economic impact could range from $200 to $300,000 every year in flood insurance savings for those people. And frequently, sellers of property in the floodplain that are requiring flood insurance see that those properties are on the market much longer because flood insurance is required. Very shortly, that will no longer be required. Sellers of property that require flood insurance often see a lower purchase price, again because the property is located in a floodplain. That is expected to change too. And of course, many of those properties in the area are in the price range for first-time home buyers, and that again is an important component. So again, as I mentioned before, there's some very good news from the Federal Emergency Management Agency concerning the floodplain in the city of Stevens Point. We do have a little bit more work we have to do, though fundamentally the project is over. We're required to run some public notices in the Portage County Gazette. There's a public comment period where people can either support the change or, I can't believe anybody would be opposed to it, but at least be able to offer testimony in that area. So we again thank those who have worked so hard over the years, many directors of public works, Mayor Halverson, Director Schatzsnyder, John Gardner, Community Development Director Michael Ostrowski, and others who have been so involved in making the seawall project a reality here in the city of Stevens Point. And I think it would also be very appropriate at this point to remind our community that the dam and the seawall are owned and operated by Consolidated Water Power Company, which is a subsidiary of NewPage Corporation, and without their cooperation on this project, it never would have come to fruition. So a big thank you to Consolidated Water and Power Company, who has coordinated and worked with us over the years.